He might be the best goal scorer who has ever lived. He breaks records the way other players break sweat. And for the first 25 years of his life, the biggest tournament in his sport, the World Cup, happened entirely without him. Not injured, not dropped, just never there. Because the country he plays for hadn't reached one since before he could walk. 28 years of watching from the outside, while everyone agreed he was too good, too big, too unstoppable to be missing. And then came the strangest summer of his life, the summer he finally walked out onto that stage and knocked the 5-time champions of the world flat on their backs. It starts oddly in England, a grey city called Leeds, in the summer of 2000. A baby boy is born to a footballer, his father a hard-running Premier League professional. And for a moment it looks like England has itself a future son. But the family is Norwegian to the bone, and when the father's career winds down, they go home, to Bryne, a small town on Norway's rain-swept west coast. The kind of place where the football pitch is the center of the world and the sea is always gray. The boy is obsessed, not interested, obsessed. He is enormous for his age and faster than boys who aren't, and he treats a football the way other children treat breathing. His father times his sprints. His heroes are goal scorers, and all he wants from the very beginning is the one thing that turns out to be the hardest thing in the sport, to put the ball in the net more than anybody else alive. By 19, he does something that sounds made up. In a Youth World Cup for Norway's under-20s against Honduras, he scores not one, not a hat trick, 9 goals in a single match. 9, a number so absurd it goes around the planet. The boy from Bryne has announced himself, but a youth tournament is not the World Cup, and the World Cup, it turns out, was going to make him wait. What happens next is one of the great climbs in modern football, a move to Molde, back in Norway, under a manager who once scored the most famous late goal in the sport. Then Austria, Salzburg, where he walks into Europe's biggest competition as a teenager and simply starts scoring immediately, like the level means nothing. Then Germany, Dortmund, the Yellow Wall, 70,000 people. And the same story, faster. Every step up, the goals don't slow down, they speed up. And then Manchester City, the richest, most demanding attacking machine in the world, goes looking for the final piece. And finds a 6'4" striker who treats the penalty box like a laboratory. In his first 100 games for that club, he scores, get this, around 91 goals. He reaches 50 goals in the Champions League faster than any human being in the tournament's history. Faster than the legends, faster than the kings. In one season, he sets a new record for goals in England, and at the end of it, he lifts the Champions League trophy, the treble, the whole sport at his feet. He has, by his mid-20s, won almost everything a club can offer a man. Almost everything. There is exactly one stage left, the one his country almost never reaches, the one a Norwegian is, by the cruel arithmetic of a small nation, practically born to miss. Here is the thing nobody outside Norway quite understands. For 28 years, since 1998, before Haaland was even born, Norway did not go to a single World Cup. Not one. A whole generation of Norwegians grew up never seeing their country at the tournament that defines the sport. And in the middle of that darkness stood the most valuable striker on the planet, in his prime, scoring for fun every week and every 2 years, watching the World Cup on television like the rest of us. It became the strangest debate in football, the best number 9 in the world, and he might go his whole career and never play the one tournament that makes a footballer immortal. People started calling him the greatest player who'd never play a World Cup, a title nobody wants. Because it's not enough on the biggest stage to have the best striker. You have to have the 10 men around him good enough to carry him there. And for 28 years, Norway hadn't. And then quietly, on the other side of the world, the rules of the whole sport changed. The World Cup was about to get bigger than it had ever been, and the door that had been shut on Norway for a generation swung, just slightly open. 48 teams. That was the new World Cup, bigger than ever, more places than ever, the maths finally tilting toward the smaller nations. But a bigger door is still a door you have to walk through, and Norway didn't walk. They kicked it off its hinges. 8 qualifying games, 8 wins, every single one, 37 goals scored, 5 conceded, a team transformed. And at the center of it, a striker having the campaign of his life. Because Haaland didn't just score in qualifying, he scored in every game he played, 16 goals in 8 matches. Double what any other player in Europe managed, a tally that pulled level with a record set by one of the great goal machines of the last decade. And the moment it became real, Italy, 4-time world champions, the country that has ended more dreams than almost any other, and Norway went to Italy and beat them 4-1, Haaland twice in 2 minutes, and it was done. After 28 years, Norway were going to the World Cup. For the first time in his life, Erling Haaland had a World Cup to play, and nobody, not Brazil, not England, not even Norway, had any idea what he was about to do when he got there. The World Cup opens, and the questions come fast. Would he freeze? Would a man who'd waited his whole life for this stage tighten up on it? First game against Iraq, 2 goals before halftime, question answered. Next, against Senegal, a real fight. And 2 more from the big number 9, Norway winning a shootout of a match 3-2. He was, from his very first minutes, exactly the player he'd always been, just finally in the right shirt on the right stage. Norway came second in their group and marched into the knockouts, and there the pressure changed. Now one bad night ends everything. Round of 32 against the Ivory Coast, tight, nervous, level, the clock bleeding away. And then in the 86th minute, the ball drops to the one man you never want it to drop to, Haaland. One touch, goal. Norway win a World Cup knockout match for the first time in their history, the first time ever, and the whole country loses its mind. But there was no time to celebrate because of who was waiting in the last 16. Not a minnow, not a lucky draw. The most successful nation in the history of the World Cup, 5-time champions, the Yellow Shirts, Brazil. For most of it, it looked like the dream would end here. Brazil pressing, Brazil probing, and Norway hanging on through the hands of their goalkeeper. A save from the penalty spot that kept 11 Norwegians alive. And Haaland? Quiet. Marked out of it. A passenger, the critics would have said, right up until the last 11 minutes when the whole tournament turned on its head. Because that is what this striker is. You can keep him silent for 79 minutes and still lose, because the 80th is all he ever needed. Late, desperately late, Norway break, and the big number 9 does what he was built to do. A goal. And then, minutes later, incredibly another. A brace against Brazil in a World Cup knockout to level him with Lionel Messi at the top of the tournament's scoring charts. Brazil pull one back in the dying seconds, and it doesn't matter, it's over. Norway have beaten the 5-time champions. Brazil are out at their earliest stage in 36 years, and the boy who was never going to play a World Cup is in the quarterfinals of one, having knocked out the most decorated country in the sport. One more win, one more. And Norway are in the semi-finals of the World Cup, something that would have sounded like a fever dream a year earlier. Standing in the way, England, and a suffocating afternoon in Miami that no Norwegian will ever forget. Miami is 35 degrees and airless, and from the start something is wrong. Haaland is carrying a dead leg, and in that heat against that England team, the machine can't find its gear. Norway actually lead, through Sørloth. For a golden stretch, they are winning a World Cup quarterfinal. But England have their own young superstar, and Jude Bellingham drags them level and then, in the 3rd minute of extra time, breaks Norwegian hearts with the winner, 2-1. And in the cruelest image of the whole run, Haaland, spent, injured, the biggest star on the pitch, is substituted before the end, watching from the bench as the dream dies a few feet away. He didn't win it. Let's be clear about that. The story doesn't end with a trophy over his head. But look at what actually happened. A man who was told he might never play a World Cup didn't just play one. He dragged a country that hadn't been there in 28 years to within a single game of the semifinals and knocked Brazil out on the way. Afterwards, he said it plainly. This changes Norway, and it changes me. He is 25 years old, he plays for the best team on earth, and for the first time, that one missing stage, the one the whole story was built around, is no longer a locked door he watches from outside. It's a place he's been, a place he broke, a place he'll be back for. The World Cup used to happen without Erling Haaland. It never will again.